Hi, welcome to the latest lockdown hobby project. My task is to take this homemade 3D printer, this Prusa Mendel iteration 2, and then try and turn it into something a bit more modern with some newer components. Things like a new frame, because this iteration 2 has got limited capacity and it's a little bit wobbly as well, so that's got to go. A lot of the electronics and so on can stay, and I'll try and recycle as many parts as I can. So I think the next step is to get this machine stripped down to its basic bits, decide what's going to go onto the new machine, decide what's going to be recycled elsewhere, and hopefully not too many bits will end up in landfill. So there we go. Catch you soon when I've taken it all apart. Okay, the teardown has begun. It took over an hour to fully dismantle the machine. There's a pile of components. Some will go into the new machine, some will be repurposed elsewhere, and some can be disposed of. The good news is the plastic parts are biodegradable and these can be composted. Having sorted the stuff into two piles, on the left is a list of items to repurpose. These won't be used in the new machine but will find their way into other future projects. And on the right is the items that we will be carrying into the new machine. There's probably about £120 worth there, which will save us money on a complete new build of a 3D printer. There's stepper motors at the top. There's the Arduino board with a ramps board piggybacked onto it on the left hand side. The linear bearings next to that, which are quite decent quality ones, so I'll keep them. And finally the LCD display and controller I can reuse. If you're wondering about the pot noodle tub, it contains over 800 grams of fasteners, fixings, bearings and so on that I took off the old machine, some of which will be reused in the new machine. So the master plan here is to build the components into a new frame, in this case what's called the P3STEEL frame. It's a remix of the Prusa aluminium frame and has some improvements built in. It's made from laser cut steel, which is 3mm thick, and it all comes flat packed. It only takes about 20 or 30 minutes to put the frame together, and the frame being held together by 3mm cap head screws, you know, the Allen head screws, and nylon locking nuts. That does sound a bit flimsy, but it actually works and the whole thing is solid. And you may have noticed I've given the machine a name. And those of you who grew up with me will know why I've given it that name. If you don't know and are curious, you can always Google it. Okay, as an overall approach, I'd like to make it as much like the Prusa machine as possible, including having the LCD display on the front. However, the P3STEEL frame doesn't have enough headroom between the floor and the Y carriage to actually fit the display in. That's why I 3D printed some feet to lift the whole machine up by 5mm. Moving on to this weekend, I've done a quick mock-up of the machine to see how all the parts fit together. Now I've had the frame since the end of August, which has given me a chance to make some templates up to get the hole sizes right so that I can create a couple of bits to stick on the side. The first one is the it's a support box for the power supply unit that encloses the switches and so on. That mounts onto the side, onto the right hand side at the rear. And on the left hand side at the rear I've got what I call the electronics box. So that's going to have the central processing unit in it, the ramps board. It's also going to have a relay board and also a 24 volt down to 5 volt regulator board. So these are some of the items that are going pretty well at the moment. I'm happy with the power supply, I'm happy with the electronic box, although some items aren't going as well as I would like. The first one of those is around the Y carriage, which is this bit here that goes backwards and forwards. I did find out that the Y carriage belt was fine when it was at the back. However, coming forwards it snagged the belt onto the brackets underneath the bed, and this was caused by the little wheel bracket at the front being too high, which kind of messed all the geometry up. It was, however, an easy fix to get onto the CAD system and design a new one, which was 3D printed and installed, resulting in the correct geometry now and no belt snagging. Something else didn't look quite right when I attempted to fit up these two blue plastic pieces which move the X-carriage up and down. It looked as though the supplied steel bars weren't going to be long enough for a tight fit into the plastic pieces. They looked short and not by a couple of millimetres either. I measured everything up and I found out the bars should be 391 millimetres long. However, what was supplied was 376 millimetres, so they were short to the tune of 15 millimetres. That would never have worked correctly with the Prusa printed parts. It is important that these bars are long enough so that they can push firmly against the plastic parts and go right to the end. And by butting up right to the end, it does increase the rigidity of the whole assembly, and that is something that affects directly print quality. However, when it's 15 millimetres short, it's likely to affect the strength of the whole assembly. That's just too much of a gap, and there isn't a quick fix for that problem. The only viable solution is longer steel bars, and clearly I can't make these ones any longer, but I do have some longer spare bars and I can cut these down later today to the correct 391 millimetres. So that's the initial findings for this morning. I need to get the saw out and shorten some steel bars. I might even get some of the wiring actually done and connected up between today and tomorrow. That would be nice if I can actually do that. And just while we're on the wiring front, I've 3D printed some wiring clips which simply snap onto the frame and allow the wiring to be secured for a tidy job. And being 3D printed, it's possible to make things you can't actually make by any other means. And these have a circular tunnel in them, so you can insert the tie wrap and it loops back out again so you can tie it up. That's really neat. And it does actually make for a tidy job. I do want it to look tidier than the old machine. So, a bit of a mixed bag. Some things are going well. Some things, as you can see, are not going as good as I'd like. So there is a little bit of a challenge there with getting this machine sorted out. It's not something I want to sort out in a couple of weekends. That's just unrealistic. It's going to be more like a couple of months. But as I find the problems, I will overcome them. So basically that's it. I'm going to get the saw out, saw up some bars and crack on. And I'll give another update tomorrow. Hi again. Yesterday we had some bars that were too short on the machine, so my task for the day was to chop up some bigger bars to get them to the right length. I didn't actually do that because I spent the time trying to put together a jig so that I could measure the length of the bars accurately. And that's quite a handy little gadget. I just 3D printed it out using some scrap filament that I had. So that allows me to measure them up nice and accurate against the rule. I've also ground the ends down. I sawed them up with a hacksaw, but it's incredibly hard stuff. So it's always going to be a bit of a rough job and a slow job trying to cut through them. So I shaved them just to the right length with the grinder, the tool and cutter grinder. And I also used that to chamfer the ends a little bit so they went into the plastic nice and easy. And in they have gone. Now, this is how you know it's a good job. If you can pick up just one end of it and the whole thing goes up and down smoothly, you know it's pretty rigid. So that's come out exactly as I wanted it. I couldn't hope for anything better than that. As you can see, these motors have got the connectors coming out at the front. Now they should normally come out at the back, but there's just not quite enough room for them, and I don't want to damage the motors by squeezing them in. I've made some covers to go over the front, so I'll try them on a little bit later on, and hopefully that'll make them look a little bit more of an aesthetic about them. So that's it for now. I'm waiting for some bits and pieces to turn up to help with the wiring and get this power supply in, and hopefully next weekend when I've got all the bits and pieces I will be able to put at least some power on it and maybe get something working like this wire carriage. That would be rather nice if I could do that. So I will do another video when I get on to the next bit of it, but it may be a week or two yet. Catch you soon.